Welcome to day 223 on the trail. We have three readings for today from Philippians chapter 4 verse 2 through 23, 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 38 through 7:20, and 4th Maccabees chapter 17 verse 7 through 18:5. Once again, we find a number of important and powerful stories in our readings from 2 Kings today. First, I would like to note a connection between Elisha and Jesus. In the Gospels, on at least two occasions, Jesus feeds large crowds. In one case, 5,000 men, plus women and children, and in the other, 4,000. These are not random miracles, or simply a means of feeding the large crowds that have been following Jesus. Instead, they are a reminder of the work of the prophets, including Elijah and Elisha, as we see in 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 22. A man came from Baal Shalisha, bringing food from the first fruits to the man of God, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in his sack. Elisha said, "Give it to the people and let them eat." But the servant said, "How can I set this before 100 people?" So he repeated, "Give it to the people and let them eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left." He set it before them. They ate and had some left, according to the word of the Lord, as Jesus proclaims throughout the Gospels. From Matthew 5, verse 17. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill." In the arrival of Jesus, the fulfillment of the work of the Torah and the prophets finds fulfillment. Jesus was not bringing a new religion, but the fulfillment of God's work through Moses and the prophets. I would also like to briefly explore the story of Elisha and Naaman, the commander of the army of Aram. As we have seen, Aram has been an enemy of Israel for generations. However, due to the importance of Naaman to the king of Aram, the king will reach out to the king of Israel for help in curing Naaman from leprosy. Now, during one of Aram's raids against Israel, a young Israelite girl was taken captive and became a servant to Naaman's wife. Now, despite being taken captive, despite being a slave, look at what she does in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 3. She said to her mistress, "If only my lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So why does she do this? Why help her captor, the one who took her from her family and her home? No reason is given in the text, but perhaps her identity was not found in her status as a slave, but as a servant of God. By offering hope to Naaman, she demonstrates her faith in the God of Israel. Now, there must have been something different about her, because despite her status as a slave, Naaman listens to her. And more than that, Naaman trusts her enough to go to his king and ask for help from their enemies. So the king of Aram sends Naaman with a letter to the king of Israel, along with about 750 pounds of silver and 100 pounds of gold and other expensive gifts. In the letter, he says to the king of Israel, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." Now this concerns King Jehoram. The king cannot cure leprosy. Instead, he thinks that perhaps the king of Aram is trying to lure him into a fight. So King Jehoram tears his clothes, which was a great sign of tremendous grief. However, is the king's grief about the power of Aram, or his lack of faith in the God of Israel? Can God heal leprosy? Of course. We saw this as early as the story of Moses. Can God rescue Israel from its national enemies? Absolutely. God has done so repeatedly. So this is really about trust. Here we see a powerful contrast between the king of Israel, who should be setting the example of faithfulness for the nation, and a slave girl who has been taken captive by an enemy nation. In fact, we see more faith in the God of Israel from the Arameans. Naaman's wife trusts her servant enough to tell Naaman. Naaman trusts his wife enough to tell the king, and the king of Aram trusts them all enough to believe that the God of Israel can help. Then, word of the king of Aram's letter to Jehoram reaches Elisha. Verse 8. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel. So the king of Israel sends Naaman to Elisha. And Naaman arrives at Elisha's home with horses and chariots, making a great display of power and authority. After all, Naaman is the commander of the armies of Aram. He is wealthy, powerful, and a friend of the king. However, instead of impressing Elijah, the prophet does not even come to the door. Instead, he sends a messenger. Verse 10. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. Elisha looks past Naaman's show of authority and pride, and focuses on what Naaman really needs. On the surface, Elisha sees a man who is sick and needs to be healed. Yet Elisha also sees a deeper need in Naaman. And it is not an outward ailment, but something inside of him. Something that is far more dangerous. Continuing in verse 11. But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, I thought that for me he would surely come out, and stand and call in the name of his God, and would wave his hand over the spot, and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Naaman is insulted. Not only does Elisha not appear before Naaman himself, but sends Naaman away to go and wash in the Jordan River. Surely, God's prophet could have healed him directly. After all, Naaman was such an important and powerful general. But Naaman doesn't seem to recognize that asking for God's help requires humility. When seeking help and healing from God, telling God how to go about that healing is far from a wise approach. Naaman wanted help, but as long as he was still in control, as long as he was still respected, as long as he could hold on to his pride. This is the most deadly hidden disease facing Naaman. So after leaving the home of Elisha, Naaman's servants attempt to convince their master to listen to the words of Elisha. Verse 13. Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was, wash and be clean? Their approach is clever. If he told you to do something hard, would you have done that? But you will not do something simple? The servants of Naaman must have cared about him deeply to risk telling him the truth. So Naaman listens to them, humbles himself, and washes in the Jordan following the instructions of Elisha. And God healed him. Then Naaman returns to Elisha, healed and cleansed. But he also returned with a different attitude. Verse 15. Then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company. He came and stood before him and said, Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Please accept a present from your servant. He offers Elisha a gift, but with a different attitude. Yet Elisha refuses the gift. We are not told why Elisha refuses the gift. Perhaps it is to protect Naaman from believing that he can pay for his healing, and in a way, regain control. Or maybe Elisha is reminding Naaman that he did not heal Naaman of his disease. God did that. And in fact, this is the very perspective that Naaman takes back with him to Aram. Before we forget, this story of healing and redemption started in the shadows of slavery. Naaman's journey started with an unnamed servant girl who was taken from her home, but never betrayed her identity as a servant and a daughter of God. A young woman who did not see Naaman as an oppressor or an enemy, but as a child of God who needed to be healed. As we conclude Paul's letter to the church at Philippi today, we find a powerful statement on contentment. In a world that is continually telling us that what we possess is not enough, or who we are is wholly inadequate, Paul offers instructions that can offer us peace. From Philippians chapter 4, beginning in verse 11. For I have learned to be content in every situation in which I find myself. I know how to be humbled. I know how to have an abundance. In every and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having more than enough and having too little. So what is Paul's secret? Well, it's not really a secret at all. In fact, we know the secret, although we may need a reminder from time to time. Here's the secret. Philippians 4, verse 13. I have the power to face all these situations through the one who strengthens me. The answer is found in a living relationship with Jesus, who promised to be there in the good and the bad, to be present in the high points and at the low points. Someone who could offer real control for our lives when fear of the future rises up. The discipline of contentment and the freedom of simplicity is only found in the strength that comes from an active, ongoing relationship with the living Jesus. And that means trusting Jesus with our future so that we can live with freedom and to live simply today. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.